Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Sherard Show. I'm your host, Sherard. Hope you're having a wonderful Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we have a very special show. Today, we're going to be talking to a gentleman who's not only a preacher, but he also served in the military, and he also has a hit radio show as well. I was recently on it. I was privileged to be on it. He's been doing it for many years. He loves music. He loves the Lord. He loves his wife and his family, and it's an honor to have him on the show, the man himself, Mr. Stevie B. But before we get to Stevie, the Sherard Show is brought to you by the Pure Essence Television Network, where you can see this episode and many other great episodes on the show and the network. Now trending, The Temptations, the Isley Brothers, the Supremes, my recent interview with Sean Kanan, and coming soon, Billy D, and also the Supremes, one of my favorites as well. Just click the link below and you can check out the greatest episodes of your life. It's also brought to you by iHeartRadio. If you missed this broadcast on television, you can also listen to it on iHeartRadio. Just click the link, smile, and drive. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there are disc jockeys and there are great disc jockeys. And this gentleman is a great disc jockey who's been doing it for many years. He's also a decorated vet. And he also is a husband of one wife, ladies and gentlemen. He's a gentleman who's a minister and doing some great things. And we got to talk about what he's set up to encourage other gentlemen that's in the military as well. It's an honor to have him first time on the Sherard Show, the man himself, Mr. Stevie B. Welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you so much for having me on the Sherard Show. I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited to have you on, Stevie B, first and foremost. Now, Stevie, let's talk about your start. Now, you've been in the ministry for many, many years. You got baptized at an early age. How has your Christian journey been?
Oh man, it's been quite a journey. Growing up in the Lord's church, I obeyed the gospel at the age of 9. I left home at 18, went out to see the world. Actually, I went to North Carolina A&T, the Aggies, go Aggies. Went there for a year. I majored in mass communications, broadcasting, journalism. I always had a love for radio, but once I went into the military, there was just no place for me to get into radio at that time. So I completed a 20-year military career, and it was after my career was over, that's when I really got into radio.
You know, that's very interesting because radio, when we were growing up, was everything. The disc jockeys could make or break everything with a story, with records, just gave you, sometimes that's all you had before
Right.
television and things like that. So what was your motivation? Who was that disc jockey? Was it Dick Biondi? Was it Herb Kent? Who was it that got you to want to be a disc jockey?
Well, actually, it was my uncle, Granson Lindsay. He had a radio station in Rochester, New York. And I was in high school and talking with him, and he wanted me to come live with him so I could work with him at his radio station. But that never happened, sad to say. But that's when I went into the military and took another path. But
Now,
but it was him that really got me fired up about it.
Now, when you first got your first disc jockey job, were you playing records like 45s and 78s?
No, actually, now when I actually got into radio was in 2016 when podcasting first started. So I was in on the ground floor with podcasting.
Very good, very good. So that's interesting. Now you've done something pretty big when you were in the military for Brethren in Boots, where you were encouraging brethren who were far away from home that's in the military. Let's talk about that. So what was that all about? Very inspirational.
On social media, I had a few groups on social media actually, and they were Bible discussion groups that I had. But because of my military background and because of the experiences I've had with the military, trying to preach the gospel and all that on active duty, that's when I created that Brother in Boots group for those soldiers who were still on the front lines and just wanted to keep them encouraged in the gospel.
Now, is that still active?
No, it's not active anymore.
Very good. Now, and I see your questions, ladies and gentlemen. We will get to you shortly. We are talking to the man himself, the preacher, Mr. Stevie B, on the Sherard Show. We'll get your questions momentarily. Now, Stevie, I'm liking your studio. Now, that's your radio studio I'm looking at?
Yes, sir.
Now, what is it all about that you do as a disc jockey? Or you want to just play Christian music? You talk about politics. What is it that you do on your network and your station?
Now, when I first started these radio shows, my concern was to preach the gospel. So I started the show. The first show that I started was What a Word from the Lord radio show. And that show was just basically me preaching the gospel. I would come on the air every week, just preaching the gospel. But then I thought about, well, this brotherhood of ours is so vast, so big all over the world. Maybe I can invite fellow preachers of the gospel to come on the show so they could share the gospel as well. Because it burnt me out real quick. Me doing all these,
Why did you say it burned you out so quick?
because I was doing all the preaching on the shows. I was doing all the lessons. And it really did burn me out real quick. And then that's when I began to think about how I could expand the show and encourage other people to come on the show, be guests on the show as well.
Now,
And that's
Stevie,
when everything blew up.
oh, wow. So, you know, when you're preaching the gospel, I'm sure you get a lot of trolls and a lot of detractors and probably get people wanting to debate you and things like that. Does that happen? Especially when you're preaching the truth.
Now it happens a lot with the social media groups, because I have other groups. It was actually, I created one called Bible Questions and Answers. It's called Shout It Out. Now that group is still active on social media. It's called Shout It Out. And it's just for Bible questions, Bible discussions, real good groups.
So now for those who are watching and they want to be a part of your group or also be on your radio show, what do they have to do?
Just go to Facebook and search for the group Shout It Out. And you'll see a green background with a man blowing a bullhorn. And that's the group, Shout It Out. And
But
just join the group.
what about for those who are watching and want to be on your radio show to talk about the gospel?
Now for guest speakers, because I do have guest speakers every second Tuesday of the month, just get in contact with me. I'll give you my cell phone number before we go off the air on this show, and just contact me if you want to be a guest speaker on that show. I also have on that show, What a Word from the Lord, my community corner segment. There's a story behind that. You know Stacey Lattisaw, I'm sure.
I've heard of.
Yeah, she's out of Washington, D.C. One of her childhood friends, I met him at the gym when I was working out. He does a bullying program for public schools. And at the time when I met him, I didn't have a segment on my show where I could invite him on the show to talk about his program, because he's actually doing a good work in the community. So, but I never forgot about him. And I was always trying to think of ways how I could bring him onto my show. And then one day a light bulb came on, the community corner. So I'm like, okay, he's doing a good work in the community. So I invite him onto the shows to tell us what he's doing to serve in our community. And that's how that segment got started with him. So every time he would come on the show, I would always tell that story, how I met him and how this segment came to be. And since I began that segment, I've had NFL players on that segment, professional boxers. I've had Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion in the world. His great grandson, Benny Sweetwater Johnson, he's a 3-time IBF light heavyweight champion. He was on the show. I've had Dr. What was her name? But she was running as an independent in the 2024 presidential election. She's out of Covington, Georgia. She's on the show. And a lot of financial workers, college consultants, authors, all kind of folk have been through that segment since that segment began.
So it sounds like you've thoroughly enjoyed what you do.
Oh, I love it. If you listen to any of my shows, you can hear my enthusiasm in my voice. You can tell I'm just having a good time on these shows. I love it. I love the interaction that I have with the listeners as well.
Yeah, it's such a blessing to be able to have been on your show and then listen and see what you do, especially with the message in the Church of Christ. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the challenges it is being of the Church of Christ when you're trying to do the right thing in the public eye. I'm Sherard. We'll be right back right after this. This gentleman here on the show, he's currently trending on Bomb First.
Man, respect. I was looking for a person to do my audiobook, and I think I just found him.
People don't know you were actually the CEO also of Death Row Records.
I went in the grocery store and I saw him, and he came and introduced himself to me. He walked up to me and said, "You know who I am?" I was like, "No." He said, I'm Keefy D.
Now, Reggie, tell me about your book. This is going to be a bestseller. When did it come out first? And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sherard Show. I'm your host, Sherard, for our Wednesday conversation with the man himself, Mr. Stevie B, on the Sherard Show, talking about the being in the radio industry as well as being a minister and being in the military as well. But also, it's amazing because, one thing that's interesting, Stevie, is that we could get to rags and riches far faster. Well, we can get to riches far faster if we sold our souls out for the money, like so many people. So many people have sold their souls out to get rich, shoe deals, TV deals, and things like that. But that's not what we're all about in the Church of Christ. So it's a slower process. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. What's some of the challenges that you concur?
Now, when I first began these shows, that was the decision I was faced with. Do I want to monetize these shows? And what I decided, because of my mission to preach the gospel, I did not monetize my shows. So whenever the people that are working with me, I got a team of 12 people that are working with me, and I tell them up front from the beginning, this is all volunteer. You're not going to make any big checks on these shows because I'm not preaching the gospel to make money. That's not my goal here. So I never monetize my shows. And even the sponsors that I have, I don't charge people to be to be my sponsor. I never ask for money for anything. Now I've had people come on these shows and give me money for whatever reason, but I never ask for it. You know what I'm saying? So that's not what I'm about.
And that's a wonderful thing. Now, you get a lot of people from the Church of Christ wanting to be on your show and support as well.
Right. Yes, sir.
Now, Stevie, one thing that's interesting though is when you get on the road to really, really be about God's business, does it become more lonely or less lonely?
More lonely because everybody can't see your vision. Everybody's not on par with the vision that you set out for yourself. Everybody's not going to try to elevate what the work that you're doing. They'll try to tear it down quicker than they'll try to establish it and build it up. Unfortunate. That's really unfortunate though. But that's not going to stop me in my purpose and my mission. If I got to walk by myself, and I have been out there by myself, so I know what it's like being alone on this journey. So, but I'm encouraged because I know the Lord is never going to leave me. So I've come too far now to turn back.
Now, are you talking about people, your own brethren, or just people from outside of your?
My own brethren as well. Everybody's not trying to encourage the work. So that's why the congregation that I've served with now, the Helen Street Church of Christ in Fayetteville, I have some real good elders who are very supportive of the work that I've been doing, a very supportive congregation. So I just love those folk to death.
You're doing a beautiful thing, and you're using the technology of today to be able to spread the gospel, and people are hearing it. Whether they respond or not, they hear it and seeds are being planted. That ought to make you feel pretty good, huh?
Oh, it does. It does. And especially with the Nakama Awards. See, I'd never even heard of the Nakama Awards. When I came on there, I didn't know anything about that. So I had a real good friend of mine. His name is Melvin Jackson. He's from High Point, North Carolina. He loved a cappella gospel music. And it was because I talked to him. He's the one that encouraged me to actually do that show that I'm doing on Friday night, The Blast, because of his love for a cappella gospel music. I really wasn't into it like that. But talking to him, I just got me to thinking, like, that's something I can do. And that's when I put it together. I also listened to iWave Radio. Before I started my shows, I was listening to iWave Radio. And what I was hearing on iWave Radio, they was playing the acapella gospel music, but nobody was talking. The music was on a loop. It was just being played, but nobody was saying anything. And I'm like, that's something I can do. I like running my mouth, you know. So that's how I actually started and then I decided when I put my program together, I decided that I wasn't going to play anybody on my shows that I was not actually talking to. They either were going to come to my show for an interview or they've already been on my shows. That way, whenever I played their music, I would always have something positive to say about them on my shows. But that was when I was just putting it all together. And it got so, when I was scheduling the artists for these interviews, I'm being a military man, I was a long range planner. These interviews had gotten to where they were 5 years out. that's how far out I had gone. It was just so many artists out here, and I actually had artists laughing at me when I gave them the date for their interviews because it was so far away, 5 years out. And I'm telling them, well, I'm just trusting God for all this, you know. So, and I've actually had artists come on my show, and they reminded me when we was actually doing the interviews. I remember when you were scheduling me for this interview 5 years ago, and I laughed about it. And I'm saying, see, now all that work is behind me, you know. So I was just trusting God for all that.
It's very interesting you say that because, my show started off in Chicago 15 years ago. And, when I first started it, people didn't know the show. I was going up against Oprah and, people would turn around and there was no calls, no shows. You beg people to come on the show, they cancel. Sometimes you had the whole segment or the whole show, a whole hour, no guests because they all canceled. So you had to carry that whole hour yourself talking,
Right,
things like that.
right.
So, and then the Lord worked it out, where the Hollywood's elite call me multiple times a day to be on the show as if, it's kindergarten candy I'm giving away. And I'm
Okay.
very thankful for that. And then also to be able to book to show up for, a couple years out, like a couple years ago, it was booked out for a whole year straight, of Hollywood's elite. And the thing is that I just like to give people their flowers while they're with us. Something that
Right.
bothers me so much is when you read a blurb about somebody who passed away and you can't do
Mhm.
nothing about it. So I like to. I'm very thankful I had Lou Gossett Jr. in the show. I'm so glad that I've had the late great Mary Wilson and
Mhm.
so many others, who've shaped our lives. So what you're doing is a wonderful thing, Stevie. Keep doing it.
Yes, sir. I certainly appreciate it, man. I'm encouraged because one of the big highlights for me was with the Camel Awards. I'd never been to one, and in 2018, my show was nominated, and I was just glad to be nominated because I didn't know radio personalities got nominated for awards. So I was just thrilled about that in 2018. In 2020, they do it every 2 years. 2020, the pandemic hit. But in 2022, my show received the Camel Award in 2022. But I missed that award. I didn't go. And I was hearing at that time that was going to be the last Camel Award. So, but then John Emerson out of Los Angeles, California. Do you know John
I
Emerson?
sure do because he nominated my show. He nominated the Pure Essence Television
That's
Network
right. That's
for
right.
that as
That's right.
well. I was shocked.
So
I never heard of that either.
right. So I got a chance to go this time in
In
2024
Jacksonville,
last
correct?
year. Yeah, I was in Jacksonville. And that was the first time I'd ever been. So I was just glad to be there to be able to meet the artists that I actually feature on these shows. So I was like a kid in the candy store at that point.
Very good,
So
very good. Well, we really appreciate that. You have time for a few questions?
sure, sure.
All right, Stevie, thank you. So this one is from Marlita. This question is from Marlita. She is all the way in Moss Point, Mississippi. She said, it's great when you see Sherard has Church of Christ ministers and people of the gospel on the church on the show. Her question is, why does people say that the Church of Christ is the only church in the Bible?
Why? Um, because it is. Now, if you look at the history of world religion, so to speak, you will see that there's only one person in the scriptures who ever made the statement that I will build my church. And we see that in Matthew 16:18. Nobody else ever says that. So, according to history, you just have to see what was prophesied in Joel 2, Isaiah 2, Micah 2, Daniel 2. The Lord's church was prophesied. Then it was promised by Jesus to build in Matthew 16:18. And then you see that promise being fulfilled in Acts chapter 2. So that's why when we say the church of Christ, we're giving Christ the glory, and he has all authority in the church. So when you talk about denominational or just world religions, all of this is outside of the scriptures. If you can draw a timeline from the scriptures to what you actually see that was established in the world, history tells us when all these other religions were established. We can actually look in history to find these religions. The Catholic Church, this is just a matter of history, is the oldest denomination in the world. Nobody disputes that. Nobody argues that point. But the Catholic Church is not the oldest church. They're just the oldest denomination because they can't go back to the Bible for their origin. That's why we say that. And
Very
all the
good.
other denominations stem from them, according to history.
Marlita, you got the preacher started. Very good. Very good. This one is from Mr. Sherman, brother Sherman Pumphrey. He is from Dallas, Texas. He said, I am a minister as well, and great on what you're speaking about in terms of that. His question is, what do you find is the thing, or why is it that so many people are turned off by the Church of Christ?
I think they're turned off because we come across dogmatic sometimes about the preaching of the gospel, because a lot of people in the denominational world are offended when you start saying that the Church of Christ is the only church in the Bible. That offends a lot of people, because then they begin to think, well, now you're calling into question what my mother and my grandmother did, and all my relatives, what they did. You're calling their salvation into question, and that's not really what we're doing, but it can come across that way. That's why I think this.
Very good, very good. Okay, time for one more question. We appreciate this. See, we really got the preacher started. Now we need a whole other hour. All right, this one is from Brother Taylor. This is from Brother Taylor. He's from Carson, California. His question is interesting. His question is, why is it that most people feel they want to give up on going to church because they feel like everyone is going to hell? Why do you think that is? Is it because of what they read in the Bible, or the way members or people make them feel? Very good question.
If you look around in this world, there's just so much devastation, calamities, death. It's a sad state of affairs when you look around and just see what's happening in this world. And it can be very discouraging. But people lose hope that there is something better after this life. And if you don't have that hope of salvation, it's easy to give up on life. But people give up on life as if there's nothing after life. And that's just a sad commentary when you think about it. But our message to the world is hope. There is hope after this life. And that's what the preaching of the gospel is all about, to save souls, to
Very
give
good.
you hope.
We really appreciate that. We appreciate it. It's not more questions, but we don't have time to get to them all. We thank you so much, Stevie. For those follow-up questions, where can they be able to reach out to you?
You can send your questions to my email, butlersteve1009@yahoo.com. Or if you want to get on my shows, just give me a call, 910-709-9736. Be glad to entertain you.
We really appreciate that. And we thank you so much for stopping by for a moment or two on the Sherard Show. Any final thoughts?
I'm just glad to be on this platform with you. Heard about your shows, and I was so thankful that you came on my show. And I'm just encouraged by the work that you're doing. So keep it up, brother.
Really appreciate that, Stevie. And definitely make sure you subscribe to his show as well, Blog Talk Radio. Give the name of the show again.
Wherever you're getting your favorite podcast from, just search for Stevie B Media Production, and you'll see all of the shows that I'm producing here on a weekly basis.
Stevie, that Stevie B is such an R&B name. You're not an R&B singer?
No, but you know what? Let me tell you how I got that name. Give me time to tell that story. There was a brother at my congregation. Every time he saw me, he would say, Stevie B, Stevie B. And I'm like, that got a nice little ring to it. And I just wish I'd have carried that name when I was in high school.
Yeah, that's very good. I really appreciate that. Well, make sure you all keep it locked in on the Sherard Show. We got some great episodes upcoming. As a matter of fact, on our next episode of the Sherard Show, we have the legendary Holly Berry stopping by the show to talk about what she has upcoming, and also what's all the talk been about. You don't want to miss that. Make sure you keep it here on the Sherard Show. For Stevie B, the Sherard Show, and everyone else, always remember, the best way to get back on your feet is to miss 3 car payments. I'm Sherard. See you next time. Bye now.